a submission online from Ananish Chaudhuri.
Kia ora, morena, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. My name is Ananish Chaudhuri. I'm professor of economics at the University of Auckland. My views are my own and not those of my employer. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak this morning. By way of background, I was born in India and did my undergraduate studies there. I studied further and then taught in the United States for many years. I'm a citizen of New Zealand and I've called this place home for more than 2 decades. I have 2 daughters, 19 and 16, who were born here. I support the treaty principles bill introduced by ACT. I believe the debate around this bill is fundamentally important if New Zealand is to remain a multi-ethnic and multicultural nation. I acknowledge the discrepancies between the Māori and English versions of Te Tiriti Waitangi. But I believe that the debate on whether Māori ceded sovereignty to the British Crown is sublimated by a long list of subsequent acts and laws that hold New Zealand to be an independent sovereign state. Parliamentary sovereignty has long been considered a foundational constitutional rule. I may be wrong. But to those espousing the Māori did not cede sovereignty view, I wish to highlight 2 issues. First, is it really possible to have separate laws, separate schools, or separate health systems for one ethnicity? It does not work. I think a lot of people are of the view, what is wrong with the status quo? Why rock the boat? But the problem is that the demands for separate treatment tend to expand and encompass more and more areas of social interaction. A liberal democracy cannot survive unless everyone is treated equally, subject to the same laws. I have just returned home from an extended visit to India, the country where I was born. I actually got back yesterday. I'm seriously jet lagged because it's 1 a.m. for me right now. But I felt compelled to speak here today. This is especially because if you want to see the pernicious effects of different policies for different groups, then India's experience provides a cautionary tale. India has one rule for one set of religions and another for other religions. Some states are treated differently from others. There are extensive reservations in education and jobs based on ethnicity. The result is outright hostility between groups. This often prevents mutually beneficial exchanges between them. It has led to the demise of parties with broad national appeal and seen the rise of numerous small issue-based political parties that cater to the demands of specific interest groups. There are other examples in other countries. In all such cases, these divisions are seriously detrimental to social and economic progress. I'm afraid that we in New Zealand may be headed down this path of ethnic tension and hostility. The second issue I wish to highlight is this. According to the 2023 census, as much as a quarter of our population identify as neither Pākehā nor Māori. The 1987 Court of Appeals decision essentially envisioned the treaty as a partnership between Māori and Pākehā, or the Crown. But if you accept this bicultural view of New Zealand's citizenship, that the treaty indeed establishes a partnership between 2 out of many ethnic groups residing in the country, then what does this imply for the quarter of the population that is neither Pākehā nor Māori? What loyalty or kinship can this quarter of the population, full-fledged Kiwis like my daughters, feel to a country where their very existence seems to be an afterthought? Are they destined to be second-tier citizens governed by an uneasy alliance between the Pākehā and the Māori? If the basic argument is about equity, then why are these people being excluded? Why race? Why not need? We have a choice. We can choose to remain a liberal democracy where everyone counts, or we can become an ethnocentric nation based on identity politics and driven by ethnic tensions. Because make no mistake, the current path where particular ethnicities are granted partnership status can only lead to the eventual appearance of more ethnic parties fighting it out for a seat at the table, as has happened in other parts of the world. Thank you very much. I'm going to stop here. I'm happy to answer questions if there's time.
Thank you, Ananish. We've got 3 questions to start. Todd Stevenson, then Tamatha Paul, then Tākuta Ferris.
Thank you, Ananish, for your submission. And I think you represent the view of many who would like to have this conversation. In fact, even some of the people who are submitting against this bill have said it's time we have this conversation. What is the effect, and obviously you're an immigrant and come from an immigrant community, what do you think the effect is if we don't actually get some definition around what the treaty means in modern New Zealand for our society and as you said, the rights for everyone?
Well, obviously, that's a broad question, and I don't know the exact answer, but it seems to me that there is no other option other than to have a liberal democracy where the same rules apply to everyone. Because if we go down this path of different rules for different people, there is really no ending to it. Because people are people. Once we get used to these separate rights, separate rules, it is very difficult to give up on those or to change track and go back. So the current process, the current process to me really completely ignores this quarter of the population that has been here for a very long time, that are citizens, but don't seem to have a seat at the table.
So Ananish, we'll go to Tamatha Paul, then Tākuta Ferris.
Morena Ananish. So you talked about your first point was about separate schools and separate systems, and I understand the point that you're making. So why is it okay to not have schools based on, you know, what you're talking about, but it is all good to have charter schools, which separates people who can afford to send their kids to charter schools and people who cannot send their kids to charter schools? What's the difference between the current status quo, where we have 2 different types of schools for different economic classes of people? Why is that okay? And then schools like kura kaupapa and mainstream schools is not okay?
But I did not say that. I have not addressed this issue of charter schools versus regular schools.
You did. You said separate schools.
Sorry, I understand, but I'm simply talking about schools based on separate ethnicities. Again, it's
What's the difference between ethnicity and class?
Why
is one okay and not the other?
Tamatha, we're going to take...
There is a very fundamental difference. Sorry.
What we're going to do is I'll just pause your time for a second so that we can conduct the hearings with a relative amount of order and time, people can get their questions. SUPs will have to come through the chair because we do have people lining up for questions, and if we have members yelling out SUPs constantly and engaging with the submitter, it uses up other people's time. So I'll let you finish, Ananish, and then we're going to go to Tākuta Ferris.
First.
Yeah, we'll move on to the next question from Tākuta.
Kia ora, Ananish. I just want to put into our discussion a little bit of clarity that multicultural New Zealand began in 1840, because it wasn't the British who got entry. It was the British, the French, the Austrians, the Germans, the US, they all came in at the same time. So the multicultural idea is a long dispelled idea. So my question to you, Ananish, is this. Do you have an Indian passport and do you have a New Zealand passport? And if you do have both, would you give up the Indian passport for the New Zealand passport?
I have given up my Indian passport for a New Zealand passport.
Ka pai, kia ora.
Okay, thank you. If there's probably time for one very quick question. If anyone has any? No, okay. We'll wind up there. Thank you, Ananish, for your time this morning and for presenting to the committee. We do appreciate you being with us at this early hour.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.